Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Good day, narrative nerds. It's time for us to flip some pages on MyStar95.com. Welcome to the Books That Make You show. I am Desiree Duffy, your host. And today we're talking about books that make you be a better manager, leading others, managing teams. How can you go from being a wide-eyed novice to a sought-after leader that people want to work for? And more importantly, how can you move from being a worker to a facilitator of an energized team? Dr. Dominic Mcloughlin is our guest. Now, his multi-award winning book is called Be a Better Manager in 5 Minutes a Day. He is a highly qualified business management specialist, both as an educator and a consultant. Now, Dr. Dominic has 20 plus years experience in management and leadership, as well as his own consulting business and the new online business leaders lab. Dr. Dominic has also taught hundreds of university courses on business and management. And Dr. Dominic, I'm excited to talk to you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Desiree. Great to be here.
All right. And you could go ahead and hold up your cover so people understand what the artwork behind me is supposed to be.
Okay.
There it is. There it is. It's like the monsters, especially when we're a manager or a leader. Sometimes we feel like we're a little monster climbing up that corporate ladder, right?
Exactly. And whether we're the monsters or whether we're managing monsters is a matter of opinion, but yeah.
Very true. Okay, we're going to dive into all of that because there's a lot for us to unpack. So let's start with just the foundation. Tell us, why did you write this book?
So initially, I was working in a big multinational IT company, and they would have changes going on every 6 months or so. And I was interested in how some of the managers were able to take their teams on that journey and others had difficulty. So I was kind of interested in exploring why that might be. And then I was sort of reflecting back and realizing in my very first job before I went to university, I was working in a warehouse and I had a supervisor who was really like micromanaging and kind of, controlling a bit. And I was contrasting that on reflection with the manager that was actually very kind of supportive, who was above supervisor. So I was actually thinking about that. And in all of those thoughts, and also looking a little bit in the research, I think one of the key things is really how much we trust our manager. Because we can trust our manager, but not our organization, or we can trust our organization, but not our manager. And I think from a human resources perspective, there's a lot of things like, job satisfaction and career development and so on, which actually come down to how much we can trust our manager. So that's sort of where I was coming from with it. So it's like, well, how do we explain that in a way that people can, I guess, put into practice? So hence the 5 minutes a day. So it's really about trying to help people who are really good at whatever their technical job is. And by technical, I just mean like I'm an accountant, I'm a lawyer, I'm a call center operator, I'm an IT engineer. But then we don't necessarily educate people in how to manage a team. So you go from being part of a team to suddenly managing a team. It's like, well, what do we do about that? So the idea was to try and make that accessible to people.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that transition that people experience when you're going from being the worker bee and you're following orders, you're following instructions, you're part of this team, and you're one of the many cogs that are in the wheel, so to speak, to the one who's actually in charge. That can be an adjustment for a lot of folks, can't it?
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is if we're sort of getting on very well with the team and we're suddenly in charge of the same team, it's how do we go from friends to boss? So it's actually quite a difficult transition. Yeah. I think one of the things to do is to kind of sit down with people and have a chat about, okay, things have changed. Here's how I was thinking of approaching it. How do you react to that? And try and, I guess, have a kind of off the record conversation about how we think we should move forward. And sometimes that's about saying, well, look, I guess the classic 9 to 5 doesn't apply as much anymore, but 9 to 5, I'm the boss. After 5, I'm the friend or the colleague or whatever.
Yeah.
So that can work.
I think your dog in the background agrees with you. He's very.
I'm really sorry about that.
That's
Decided
okay.
to just start barking right outside the window.
That's okay. It happens. You speak about having that regular 9 to 5 job, and nowadays that isn't necessarily a thing. And this is why we can work from home. We can do shows from home. And one of the things that I think is really cool is I'm in the United States and you're halfway around the world right now in Australia. So there's that really cool thing. So if we got a dog in the background, it's okay. It happens. It happens.
I'll try and yeah.
But to your point, okay, being able to kind of turn that switch off and being someone's friend as their manager when you're not experiencing actual office hours. What tips or advice do you have for people to actually do that, to put that into practice? Because that can be difficult, can't it?
Yeah, and I think also it's also about understanding that workplaces and managing people is really all about those professional relationships. So having a good relationship with someone doesn't mean that's necessarily a bad thing. So we don't have to cut off friendships. We just have to be clear on, when I'm giving you an instruction as someone who's asking you to do something with authority, and when I'm asking you to do something where I want your opinion, and I'm asking you to do something when I am just sort of making a suggestion. So it's partly about us being clear in our language, in our approach, in our communication with what it is that we're trying to do, but also to ensure that the person that we're speaking to is clear about what it is that we're asking them to do. So sometimes it's about actually trying to be more deliberate, but also to bear in mind that, I think trust is only built on good relationships. So it's not about saying that we can't be friendly. It's not about saying we can't, have a good relationship with people. It's about getting that clarity around what it is that I'm trying to do and in what capacity I'm trying to do it.
Yeah. Can we talk about the 5 essential people skills that you think that managers need in order for them to succeed?
Sure. I think the main thing is thinking as categories. So there's kind of like the mindset that we bring, and then there's the motivation that we have, and then there's the behavior that we exhibit, and then there's the way that we apply it. So in a sense, building trust and building outstanding performance is about trying to ensure that we have the right mindset ourselves, that we're approaching it in a way that we, as well as obviously we need to get things done. The organization needs to make a profit, or it needs to be profitable. If it's not for profit, it needs to be able to cover its costs. The mindset we bring, though, is we can also help the people who are working for us or part of our team to actually get what it is they want out of their careers as well. So how do we kind of use that mindset of like, I want the best for you in as far as it's possible in getting the best for us? So there's that kind of like, how do we help our team? And I guess I would contrast that kind of mindset with I'm here for 1.5 years to maximize my outcome and get out of here before everything goes to garbage. It's like there's a very kind of self-centered approach that we can bring, or a self-centered mindset, which is about us getting what we want and getting out or getting on or getting up or whatever. So that was one of the things that the research showed, that actually the mindset of wanting the best for the people in your team is a really key way of building trust and therefore of building outstanding performance. So mindset was kind of like the first one. In terms of motivation, it's kind of like, well, what's actually driving me here? Like, how am I kind of building the capacity for people to I guess learn from mistakes? So one of the key things too about our motivation is our ability to have an appropriate balance between the needs of those individuals and our own kind of capacity to get things done, but also to have a genuine interest in the professional development of those people, and also to allow people to make mistakes. So we have to be aware that we make mistakes, and sometimes people are going to notice that and perhaps even point it out to us. So we have to be like a little bit humble, a little bit open, a little bit vulnerable around the fact that none of us are actually perfect. But the other thing that's interesting about that is, again, the research in the book and elsewhere shows that if you're able to do that, then it allows your team to make mistakes. And we focus on learning from those mistakes as opposed to trying to avoid mistakes and cover them up and, blame others and so on. So it's part of building a genuine kind of learning culture, or a kind of, learning together approach, if we're able to have that kind of learning from mistakes idea. And the other thing that was interesting is that trust is really built by a number of things that we kind of know intuitively. And I sort of ask people occasionally when I'm speaking to them, think of the best manager you ever had. Now think about what characteristics they had. And one of the interesting things is that, unsurprisingly, honesty is like one of the most important things. And then connected to that is actually the idea of honoring commitment. So if I tell you I'm going to do something, I've then got to do it, because otherwise I'm undermining the honesty, which again, I think most of us have experienced. Most of us would kind of know that. But I think there's another kind of view out there that actually what I do is I say whatever I need to say in order to bring someone on board. And so that may work in the short term, but if you're talking long term, and I mean, 6 to 12 months, then that actually undermines your capacity. Like from then on, people start to doubt what you're saying to them if you're not able to be upfront about things. And they start checking with others, and then gossip becomes rife because it's like, well, I'm not getting it from the top, or from my manager or my boss, whatever. So I can start asking other people and networking, which is a positive thing in some ways, but it may not be if that's my source of information, which isn't correct. And then we have different stories floating around and people feeling anxious and so on. So I guess those are kind of like some of the ideas, at least.
I'm curious too, from the other end of the spectrum. I know as somebody, I have a team myself and I run a business, and I look for leadership skills in folks because I want to build up managers. I want somebody else to manage a lot of these workflows and people and kind of be the one that's more of the team leader. What do you suggest for people when they want to stand out from the rest? What kind of skills should they hone in and show to their potential, the manager that's ahead of them, or the director or the boss of the organization?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because in essence, most managers are time poor and would be grateful, as you say, for the opportunity to give someone else the work, to delegate something. So if you're working for someone and you really would like to aspire to be in that role, or to, move ahead into management in some form, one of the things you can do is actually go and say, look, I have got quite a bit on, but I'd like to work on a project, or I would like to take this off your plate. Like, to actually volunteer that, not in a kind of like controlling, give it to me kind of way, but in a, if it would help you, I would be happy to name the thing, So I think most people react really well to that, because, as you say, most people are, hoping to reduce the amount of things they've got to manage because there's so much going on. I think there is, I guess I'm always talking about, the best and the worst managers in the book. So I kind of always sort of put the flip side, because I'm aware that there are also managers who go, no, that's mine. And they sort of feel anxious, that if I lose any of the work that I'm doing, then I've lost control and, it's all mine. And that's why I'm the manager. So it's about assessing who you're working for. But I think most people are going to be genuinely happy to relieve themselves of some work.
And I think that goes back to the trust that you're talking about. If people feel they're in an environment where they can trust the organization, trust the people around them, there is a lot of times people feel like, this is mine. Don't touch my work. Don't touch it, because they're afraid that it might mean that they're going to be replaced, that they're not going to make as much money. When in reality, I know this for myself. It's like, can I take this off of your plate? Because I want you to do something bigger. Not because I'm trying to take something away. And unfortunately, people sometimes have that it's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. It's like they're guarding their kill in the wild. Don't take my gazelle away from me. It's mine, right?
Yeah. And I think the irony is my sort of observation, because in IT, this is kind of particularly, I guess it's true of all organizations, but in IT, it's like, well, my skill is this, that's why I was employed. So people feel kind of anxious about, if I lose that thing. But as you say, actually, it frees you up to do more strategic things. Like, there's always more you can do about analyzing what's going on around you, attending, networking events to build client bases, and all those other things that, in a sense, a manager's job is never done. So if you can relieve yourself of some of the work which helps that person to build their capacity, and you do that with a number of team members, then actually your whole capacity as a team goes up rather than it going down. And you sort of like suddenly not having your job because your job is bigger than that little task or that small project or whatever it is you decided to share with someone else.
Financial understanding is power. What do you mean by knowing the numbers and making sound business decisions? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I just think, again, coming back to the idea that, people get promoted into management without necessarily being an accountant or necessarily having done, financial courses or whatever. So knowing the numbers, I think, is really important because it allows you to communicate upward, but it also allows you to understand the impact of some of your own sort of decision making. So one of the things that I think really empowers people is if they can understand, what's the difference between, revenue and sales and profitability and margins and etc. That just gives you a common language, which when you're sitting in a meeting of more senior managers or more senior people, they'll be talking about some of those terms and it helps to understand them. But then when you've got that understanding yourself, you can go, well, we could go with project A or we could go with project B. I might go with the one that's got the higher margin. I just think it really empowers people then to have a deeper understanding of why some decisions are made and to make better decisions themselves.
Yeah. And going along with the point that you made before, looking for ways that you can help. I recall earlier in my career, I saw a lot of waste on a certain project and I knew I could do that project. They were outsourcing to somebody. I was like, if we pulled that in-house and I ran the numbers, and I was not a numbers person, but when I showed a bottom line to the president of the company, it was like that got their attention. It wasn't, oh, I can do this. Oh, we can do this in-house, because they just thought and saw things in dollar signs. So to your point, speaking that language and being able to understand what sales margins are, what ROI is and all of that, it really can help.
Absolutely. And that's a great point you make, because often we think about, the sales and the margin side, as I was talking about, but actually there's a lot of cost reduction we could do in-house. I had a similar experience to you. We had a person who was doing internal recruitment. They were saving a lot of recruitment fees from the recruitment agencies, and the managers were happy with the outcomes. So we said, look, if we employed a second person, we can increase the number of roles we're doing in-house, and this is how much we'll save. And as you say, it's that bottom line number. They want to see that actually it does add up. But that bottom line number is like, oh, okay. So it's good to be able to do that.
What are some common mistakes that you think new managers make? And what do you think they should be doing instead? Yeah,
I think when we're promoted the first time round to managing a team, I guess there's things like, we talk about, imposter syndrome or a little bit of uncertainty, or like everybody has that sort of a level of self-doubt, like how's it going to go? And even if we're not being promoted, from the group we're going to manage, coming into a new team in a new organization is kind of always a little bit nerve-wracking. And again, I think the temptation is to be more kind of withdrawn and kind of keeping things to oneself and not necessarily, feeling like, so one of the key mistakes is I've got to have all the answers now because I'm the manager. It's like, well, we just need to relax a little bit and to go, okay, well, these people have been working in this team longer than I have, so why don't I have a conversation with each of them and find out, what they think works and what they think doesn't, and then make some assessments and come back to them and say, well, here's what I'm thinking from what, our individual one-on-one discussions. Here's what I think. What do we as a team think about that? Would that help? So that idea of like dialogue, not feeling that we have to have all the answers, is one of the really key ones. And the second one really is to be open to sharing information and not feel like, as we talked about, you can't make a mistake. Again, when we're first managing teams, like I've got to be perfect. I can't do anything wrong. It's like, well, actually, we learn from mistakes. So yeah, it's kind of, I think that they're kind of like two key things that we tend to worry about, which perhaps are counterproductive.
Can we talk a little bit about strategy and the role of strategy for small, medium businesses?
Yeah. So again, I think understanding strategy is a bit like understanding finance. So even if we're in a larger organization, understanding how the strategy might be implemented is helpful for us in implementing things in our own area so that we're acting consistently with that. But I think for small and medium businesses, it's even more important because, again, particularly if you're like a solo business or a business with just a couple of people, you've got your really good idea and you've set up your business based on that. It's like, okay, so that's good. What about in the next 5 years? Where do we want to be? And understanding strategy is about understanding the industry that we're in, who we're actually competing with, who our customers might be. And coming back to the finance again, it's like, well, there are different customers. There's the whole, I don't know if you found this yourself, but the 80-20 rule that kind of like 20% of your customers bring in 80% of your sales. So, there's some of those things to understand can really help a small, medium business owner who's busy doing the doing to take a step back and think about, okay, if I want to increase my revenue or get into a new market or understand my customers, where do I want to be in 5 years? How can I work back from there? And then how can I align that with my strategy so that I've actually got a way of getting to the end point? So it's partly about taking a deep breath, but it's also partly about looking ahead and seeing, well, what will I need to do in order to be there? And as small, medium business owners are so busy, I think that's one of the challenges.
And does that tie into finding your customer and strategizing to seek out new customers?
Exactly. Yeah, I think again we can kind of we could think about how I'm in this market, producing this product or service, but we don't always again take a step back and think about, well, who do I actually like working with? Like, who are the customers or the clients that actually give me joy versus the ones that give me trouble? And how can I find more of the ones that give me joy? And what is it about that gives me joy? And how can I increase the amount of exposure I have in those sorts of areas? And then also, perhaps, what are some other things that I could do which are related to that? I think if we think about some of the big companies, they do merchandising, so a lot of people have merch. Well, have I thought about that? Is that something I should do? Maybe not. Maybe that cheapens my brand, but maybe it is. Or maybe the merch would be something that my customers really like, or it helps build a relationship with those people that I'm dealing with, my joy-filled customers. So it's about thinking, where are those people? How do I reach them? And then how do I attract them and retain them?
And the time that we have on our plate is oh so precious. And I know part of the reason why you created the Business Leaders Lab was this idea of, if you go to school and get your MBA, sure, that can set you up so that you can become a leader or a manager or own your own company. But a lot of us just don't have that kind of time. Can you tell us a little bit about the Business Leaders Lab?
Sure. So the idea is I've taught, MBA students for quite a long time. And I also have run my own business for quite a long time and dealt with business leaders and managers. And as you say, they're so time poor, it just seemed like, well, what are the kind of good bits? If I don't need the piece of paper and I don't want to pay the money and I haven't got the time, how do I just get the kind of key highlights that I really need to understand how to run my business? So I'm not really interested in an MBA as such. I'm just interested in the knowledge which I need to give me a broad spectrum of overview of how businesses are run, and some of those things we've been talking about, things like strategy and finance and finding your best clients. How do I understand the theory behind that, and how do I put that into practice? So the Business Leaders Lab was to try and provide that to people who really busy running a small or medium business and just want to get the kind of highlights rather than the MBA as such.
Yeah. And I know too, again, hiring people over the years, a lot of times I might see that fancy MBA after their title, but I want to know that they can do the job. I want to know they have the know-how and the ability to think on their feet and to manage situations more so than just having a fancy title. So yes. To your point, getting those good bits, I love that. The good bits is so important, isn't it?
Yes. And I think the other thing is MBAs and those sort of masters of anything are really becoming a lot more common. So they used to be quite a discriminator, but I don't know that they are such a discriminator anymore.
That's a good point too. Yeah, yeah. So many people have them nowadays. Is there anything else that you can think of that people can do to really set themselves apart in this very competitive world nowadays? What can they do, especially if there's a certain industry that they want to get in, or they have a certain goal in mind?
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. One would be to kind of do some personal research into that industry. So it's helpful to have a good understanding of how that industry operates, but also who are the key players in it. And then with social media, I think, probably LinkedIn would be the most sensible one for a business type operation. But to find those industry associations or those groups in who hold networking events, and to go along to some of those in person, and then try and connect with people on LinkedIn or whatever the social media is that's appropriate. And then you can start to see, well, what are the sorts of things those people have done in order to get to where they are, and then how could I replicate some of that, or how could I go along and have a chat? Like one of the things I think we can do, especially when we're starting out, is ask people, look, can I just grab half an hour with you for coffee? I know you're super busy, or maybe on the phone, or maybe on Zoom, or whatever, just to chat to, about your story, how you got here. A lot of people like to be asked about their story, so they're often happy to help people who are starting out. So not to underestimate that as a way of doing it, but I wouldn't do that until I'd done the other thing. So you've got to know the industry, you've got to know who the players are, you've got to know how this person got to where they are, so that when you come to chat to him, you can say, look, or even in your email, trying to ask them for coffee, I noticed that you did X, Y, and Z. I just really wanted to have a chat to you. So it's about showing that you're not just some person who's trying to copy them. You're some person who's looked at the industry, understands what they've done, and really want to get some advice from them. And the other thing too is a lot of industry associations and other organizations provide, formal mentoring programs. So sometimes you can actually say, please, can I have a mentor? And sometimes you have to pay a bit of money to join that society or that association. But if you've done your research, you'll be joining the right one, and it'll actually be well worth it, because you can then start to get some benefit from it. So there are a few things that I reckon would be good.
Great advice. And all of those I've seen in action work for people. And to your point, doing just a little bit of research to find out about the industry, find out about the person, ask them to coffee, even if it's over Zoom, and really think about the goals that you have in mind and where you want to be, because that all comes together oh so well, and it can really set you apart. Dr. Dominic, I'm curious, with your book, what was the most exciting thing that you found out about yourself as a person, a professional, as a writer, while you were writing your book?
Yeah, so I guess personally, the insight into the fact that I'd been interested in trust for a while was it sort of came out while I was writing it. So that was interesting, because I wouldn't have sort of said it in that way in the past. So that was one thing. I think the other thing that a lot of people who write mention is how to kind of find your reader and therefore your voice. Like, who am I writing for, and how am I chatting to them? So having also had an academic background, I found it a bit of a challenge, because, in academia, if you're writing a journal article or something, you always have to go, well, who said that, and where do I cite that, and whatever. So I tried to minimize that, but keep it, there in the book. But that's not what people are reading the book for. So I had to really kind of adjust my thinking. So yeah, I really it was quite a process to change the way I was thinking and the way I was writing. But yeah, I really felt grateful actually for that process, although it wasn't easy.
Yeah. And it really is. I hear that from a lot of people in the academic sphere, where when they go to write a book, or a lot of times too, I find this with folks that are used to writing big, long research paper or term papers or essays. And it's like, guess what? In the marketing world, it's got to be short, sweet, to the point. It's like, whoa, it's like their world is suddenly flipped upside down.
Yeah, exactly. And also to kind of keep it interesting and entertaining, because that's not necessarily what you're doing if you're writing a white paper. It's like,
Exactly. Precisely. Dr. Dominic, okay, where can people go to find out more about you, find your book? Give us all your details.
Sure. So the book is available on Amazon, so that's pretty straightforward. In terms of myself, dominicmcloughlin.com is the best place to find me. If you're interested in the Business Leaders Lab, you can go to businessleaderslab.com, but that's also available through my dominicmcloughlin.com website as well. And in terms of other things, just look me up on YouTube or LinkedIn, and look forward to chatting to anybody who's interested.
Absolutely. Dr. Dominic Mcloughlin, author of Be a Better Manager in 5 Minutes a Day. There's the cover. Thank you so much for joining us on the Books That Make You show today. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much, Desiree. It's been great.
And thank you, everybody, for being here as well. Please take a moment to find us on our website. It is booksthatmakeyou.com. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our Webby Award-winning newsletter. That way you never miss news about a show with wonderful authors like Dr. Dominic. Plus, we have giveaways and all sorts of fun stuff. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and of course on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, ring the bell, get notifications, again, so you never miss a great show or programming from the Books That Make You. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.